Pasqua, as we say in Italian, because you all know how Italian I am. So we've been hunkered down. This is the fourth Sunday in a row now. We've been doing church from home. And I hope that all of you are holding up well, because the anxiety levels seem to be escalating. I've had some conversations with folks who are starting to feel the pressure. So we're looking at Easter, the spring, the vernal equinox, the spring celebration of renewal. And from a perspective of a non or pan-denominational view of Easter, what does it really mean? And who is this Jesus character of whom so many speak, and what is the nature of the Christ? So first of all, I don't know answers to any of those questions, but let's see what reveals itself. Full disclosure, I've been leading this church for 11 and a half years now, and we've built a community of people who have various levels of relationships to the story of the Christ or of Jesus. And we've built it as a pan-denominational church that does not lean on Christian teachings. But from time to time, I do bring in the principles that I believe there was a character who people spoke of, who was probably, according to Esti, who's from Israel, was probably known as Yehoshua in his day. My ordination, my true ordination, came through an internal experience of that which at the time I called Yeshua, and what would be represented visibly as the traditional character of Jesus. He came to me in my darkest hour. This experience happened within 24 hours after I lay in the dark on the floor, cursing at God with every swear word and curse that I could muster. And those of you who know me fairly well know that I've got a pretty good vocabulary of cursing, if I want to call on that. So here I was cursing God, daring him to kill me, calling him a coward if he wouldn't. And within 24 hours had this visitation of this powerful yet incredibly loving entity embodied in the cloak of the traditional vision of Christ, that embraced me and whispered the words of ordination into my ear, which were, the words were, "You are my sword." So I take that as my true ordination. And so when I think of my ministry, I think of myself as a minister ordained by the Christ. But I am not a Christian minister. I have not been to anybody's school of, nobody's seminary, I don't have a degree in theology, although I've studied it my whole life from various cultural approaches. And I did spend about 5 years in a group that studied the Gospels and studied the concept of the mystical Christ. And I want to talk about that a little bit. What is the mystical Christ? What is mystical anything? We talked about this a little bit last week. It seems like the spiritual traditions have taken two paths over the centuries for which we have some documentation. One is the religious path, the organizational path, the doctrinal path. And the other is the mystical path or the experiential path. And they are often at odds with each other. Because the mystical path of every religion on the planet, from indigenous to Islamic to Shinto, Taoist, Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Jewish, all of the traditions have within them a mystical aspect or a subset of that religion which focuses on mysticism. And as we talked about last week, if a human being is having an experience of something beyond the five senses, something that transcends the physical body and the physical earthly experience of human beings, if we have something more sublime and more profound than that as an internal experience, it doesn't happen in words. It happens in experience, profound experience. And then those individuals are often called upon to try to express that, to explain, describe that experience in words. Probably the most elegant of those attempts are the Sufi writers, Hafiz and Rumi, two in particular. They have, through poetry, described the experience. Some have described it through music. Those who have tried to explain it through words have found very quickly the limitation of words. And that's often what puts them at odds with that which specializes in words, which is the doctrinal nature of religion. If you read the Gospels carefully, and you read them with the notion that this is not a story of the very narrow opportunity that humans have to have some kind of truly divine experience, but an invitation to a truly divine experience. If you look at these Gospels as energy manuals, guidelines for what it takes to be a successful human, there are many clues that are included in those writings. One of the clues is that Jesus, or Yehoshua, tended to be in a fairly consistent conflict with the doctrinal authorities of his day, which should be a big clue to begin with. And it's always interesting to run into Christians today who are extremely doctrinal but don't get the point that Jesus made about your doctrine has killed the Spirit. It's the Spirit of God, it's the Spirit of the divine that beckons us, but for which we have become blinded. We've become blinded to it. And if you go back to the original story of creation in Genesis, it's this eating of the fruit of the tree, the forbidden fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, meaning that humankind went from being totally in harmony and in the total experience of the oneness of creation, and through some device chose, because of free will, to fall into the illusion of separateness and the illusion that I can judge the knowledge of good and evil. I can be the judge. This is good. This is not good. I can create my own salvation through choosing the good and distancing myself from the not good, the evil. And so we took on the salvation by ourselves. And of course, feeling insignificant, we looked, as we do in our separateness, we looked to others who seem to have some level of authority to guide us. And thus religions were built. And they were, most of them, built on the notion, not all of them, but certainly the Abrahamic religions, are built on the notion that we need an intercessor between us and God. Actually, we need a couple layers of intercessor. I was spent some time in my early part of my life in the church as a member of the Church of Rome, and in that model, you have the human being who must interact with the priests, and the priests are then the guides for the human beings. And then who guides the priests? The bishops. And who guides the bishops? The Pope. So you've got the priest, the bishops, the Pope, all standing between us and Jesus, who is the ultimate intercessor between us and God. So we've got several layers of hierarchy here that insulate us and separate us from the true experience of God. But interestingly enough, in my first metaphysical instruction was as a 10-year-old being given the adult catechism of the Catholic Church by Father Simpson, one-on-one every Tuesday night after school. And he was describing hell to me at one point. He was giving me the lowdown on what hell was. And he basically said, hell is where you are on fire, but your flesh is not consumed, so the fire never goes out because there's no consumption of fuel. If you build a fire of wood, the fire will burn until it burns up the wood and it'll go out. Not the fire of hell. It burns eternally, forever. And as a 10-year-old, that was quite terrifying. But then he said, but worse than that. And I went, holy crap, what could be worse than that? He said, worse than that. When you are in hell, you are separated from God. And you know, it took me decades before the realization of that really hit home. The worst thing that we can experience as humans is separation from the divine. And yet, that's the life we live. By that definition of the worse than that, we are literally, almost all of us, almost all of the time, living in hell. What's our salvation? Some would say the only salvation comes after death, and it comes only if you believe a certain story of the meaning of the life of this guy they call Jesus. If you're willing to accept that story, hook, line, and sinker, the way the authorities, the spiritual authorities, the priesthood, the ministry, the doctrinals, tell you it means, if you're willing to accept their interpretation of that meaning, then, and only then, can you be forgiven of the awful things you've done and you get to go to some paradise after you're dead. It seems a bit childish, and it seems, and no disrespect for people who hold that belief, because I firmly believe that any level of faith that you have in something larger than yourself, something outside the personality and the five senses that we experience, something outside of the ego-mindness of the me that I call Gene, or that you call your name, anything that leads you to a higher level of consciousness, devotion, and focus out above, beyond, and outside of that limited construct has value. I don't care what you call it, what kind of, as long as you're not hurting other people with it, which is a whole other story about what religions have done. But the story itself didn't work for me, because I tried on several occasions to swallow that pill, and I couldn't get it past my gag reflex. I mean, I went wholeheartedly. I mean, I'm in the tent at the revival with people, you know, screaming and running down the aisle to give their lives to Christ, and I'm going, yeah, I want to do that, and then I couldn't. So, for some, I'm doomed, because I'm incapable of believing this story. So I went in exploration of something that made sense to me, and what I ended up with was this understanding that this story of this guy they call Jesus has embedded meaning in it so much deeper and so much richer than the doctrinal's interpretation of it. And it has to do with our relationship with the divine, and it has to do with the fact that we are, through free will, living in an illusion of separateness. The ego mind is an illusion. I think the Buddhists have really nailed it the best, saying that the I that you think you are, there is no I there. And through exploration of that I, you can have an experience of there is no I there. Of course, then who's having that experience? There is an I that is beyond and behind the I that we name and think this is right and this is wrong and I like that and don't like that and this is my story and this is my boundaries and this is what I did and this is where I'm going and all of that. So if my interpretation is, if we're being called to something through the story of Jesus, we're being called to understand that this separateness is an illusion, that there is this place that he called the kingdom of God or the kingdom of heaven, which, by the way, if you look at the four Gospels and you look for the word Satan or hell, they only show up a handful of times. Outside of the temptation of Jesus in the desert, there's almost no reference to it at all in the Gospels. But there are over 120 references to the kingdom. So to me, the focus of those stories, of that story, is the kingdom. What is the kingdom? Jesus spoke eloquently about the kingdom. He said the kingdom is at hand. That tells me it's not pie in the sky by and by. The kingdom is at hand. It's right here, right now. He said the kingdom is within. This is the biggest clue. The kingdom is within. The kingdom, he said, is like leaven in the bread. And I thought about that. I said, well, where is the leaven in the bread? Where is the yeast? When you make dough to make bread, and then you make the flour and the yeast and whatever, the water, whatever else goes in it, and you make the loaf and you put it in the oven, you bake it, you bring it out, you slice it up, and you hold up a slice of bread, and where is the yeast? It's pervasive. It's everywhere. It's blended throughout the loaf. The kingdom is like the leaven in the bread. This generation, he said, will not pass away until many have experienced the kingdom. And he said, all of the things you've seen me do, you will do also, and more. And he was nearly stoned in the Gospel of John. He was nearly stoned for saying, I and the Father are one. He was nearly stoned for blasphemy. And he said, but it's in your scripture, where it says, and he quoted Proverbs. He said, are you not gods? So if Jesus has in so many ways let us know that there is something inside of us that we can access that will liberate us from the original sin of thinking that we can figure this out, that we can map our own destiny, and that whatever perils we come across, we're on our own to navigate. We can access the reality of our union, our common union, communion, with that which is divine, which is infinite. So the energy and the consciousness of divinity is accessible through our own inner exploration. And so this, to me, is the story of resurrection. The story of resurrection is awakening from the sleep that was described by Jesus as death. And it's the sleep of being imprisoned by the prince of the world. And the prince of the world is that energy, that inertia that wants to keep us in this consciousness of ego mind, what we today would call ego mind. This consciousness of I am this personality. That's what the prince of this world has, that's the web of illusion that has been spun for us. And it is what the prince of this world, if you will, wants to keep us magnetized in. It's the illusion that we have willingly bought into by eating the apple. So how do you uneat the apple? Well, you don't have to uneat the apple. We are where we are. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's just an adventure. It's a drama. It's like any other drama. We've wandered into peril. We've wandered into suffering. We've wandered into illusion. And how to get back to reality. And that's the game. That's the whole reason for planet Earth, as far as I can see, is to allow each and every one of us the opportunity to realize there's only one of us. And when that personality is transcended, when the consciousness of I am rises to the level of beyond the personality, we are introduced to the resurrection of the awareness of the true nature of I am and the unity of all people. And then if you read the Jesus story, what does that set us up for? What is the next thing that happens after that? Is the ascension. And we talked last week about ascension and what it means for us as a species. It means really ascending to a common experience of oneness that is a major step in the journey back to communion. So the grace of this story flows to us and through us over the millennia, over the last millennium. And even though much has been made of it that is, from my perspective, delusional, there is a core thread of truth that runs through it. And if we will allow ourselves to access it and be accessed by it, and I think that's an important distinction, to access the thread of truth in that story and to be accessed by the thread of truth in that story, we can be led to having our own experience of transcendence and our own experience of resurrection, and our ultimately then, as a community of souls, our own journey to ascension, to unity, back to unity, and out of the illusion. So wherever you're hunkered down and whatever illusions you've been harboring over the last few weeks, and everybody's got different stuff going on. For me, I've been getting like life review stuff. I've been having events from my past pop up vividly for me, things I haven't thought about in years, and relived some of those events. I hope that we are all using the time profitably to spend some time every day considering what this personality is, the boundaries that it's placed upon us, and having the willingness to explore what's beyond and behind that personality, so that we can journey along this righteous path that we are. If you're listening to this broadcast, you are on as well. So bless your hearts. And we have a little music from Meister Michael. Come on down. And so we invite you to enjoy a little musical interlude. And then wherever you are and whoever you're with or not with, be in the blessing and the bliss of the knowledge that I and the Father are one. And I'm talking about you.
Thanks, Gene. These are difficult times, but definitely very unique and memorable. And this is a song about seeing the good in this moment now, being grateful for this moment now, and finding the gifts wherever we are. May I Suggest by Susan Werner. May I suggest to you, may I suggest this is the best part of your life. May I suggest this time is blessed for you. This time is blessed and shining, almost blinding bright. Just turn your head and you'll begin to see the 1,000 reasons that were just beyond your sight. The reasons why I suggest to you, why I suggest this is the best part of your life. There is a world that's been addressed to you intended only for your eyes. A secret world, like a treasure chest for you, of private scenes and brilliant dreams that mesmerize. A tender lover's smile, a tiny baby's hands, the million stars that fill the turning sky at night. Oh, I suggest to you, oh, I suggest this is the best part of your life. There is a hope that's been expressed in you, the hope of 7 generations, maybe more. And this is a faith that they invest in you. It's that you'll do one better than was done before. Inside you know, inside you understand, inside you know what's yours to finally set right. And I suggest to you, and I suggest this is the best part of your life. This is a song, comes from the west to you, comes from the west, comes from the slowly setting sun, with a request of you to see how very short the endless days will run. And when they're gone, and when the dark descends, oh, we'd give anything for one more hour of life. And I suggest to you, and I suggest this is the best part of your life. Thank you. Namaste.